Hello, and once again, welcome to Destination Uri TV Down GA show, where this week we will again be reviewing what happened last weekend with all the twists and turns, and also looking forward to what is coming up next weekend. My name is Jarlath Tinley, and once again this week I'm joined by Paul Rooney and Patsy Russell. Hello, lads.
Good evening,
Jarlath. How you doing?
All right, good to hear from you. Plenty of action last weekend, plenty of talking points. There's quite a few of the games were a lot closer. Now, before we get into that, right, we've been doing a wee bit of forecasting over the past few weeks.
Yeah.
And I think it's only a bit right, but I'm going to put Rooney on the spot here, Patsy. Because, you know, he thinks he's the Mihal and Mora Hortic of the airwaves.
No, he doesn't.
Anyway, hold on. There was 17 fixtures played. There was two games remained outstanding from last weekend over the three championships, right? There was 17 games played. One person got 12 out of 17 correct, and two people got 11 out of 17 correct.
Oh, there.
Now,
Who won that?
Well, Patsy, I'm happy to say, Patsy, it was you that won it.
Yeah.
Right. But I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll start and go through the championships. We'll start and go through the games, and when we're talking about each game, I'll just make reference to it. But Paul, I hope now you're not going to take the hump over.
No, I'm not taking the hump. I enjoy the bit of crack, and I'm getting plenty of when we're at the grounds. Me and Patsy be at the grounds. You be there yourself, but we're getting plenty of crack about it, Jarlath, and there's plenty of people saying, Rooney, you couldn't tip a cow in the arse, you know, that sort of way, but we'll take that, you know what I mean? And hopefully I'll get a few right this week, Jarlath.
No, you're not doing too bad. And Patsy, you're keeping all right, yeah?
Not so bad, Jarlath. As you say, there was some great games over the weekend. Very close affairs, it has to be said, especially in the Morgan Fields Down Senior Championship, which we'll talk about shortly. But even in the intermediate, there was a couple of cracking matches. You know, Leighton Shamrock, for example, there played on Monday night. So we'll talk about all these in more detail.
Okay. All right, listen, let's get right into it. So starting the proceedings last Friday night in Park Esther was Breda versus Straver. Straver came out 4-point winners, 12 points to late. You were both there, as I was myself. Patsy, take her away there. How do you think that went?
I was commentating on it, Jarlath, along with Paul Dorn, and as I say, Straver played some great stuff in the first half. They lost Nicky Murray to a black card after 53 seconds. So you would have thought Breda would have been the end in a sense, but it was the other way about. And at the short whistle, at 7 points to 2. Now, what impressed me was Straver full back line. Jarlath Bard, Tomas Gordon, and Owen Murdoch. Now, Donald Hughes is a very classy footballer indeed. And I have to say, young Tomas did an excellent marking job. And the runs of Jarlath out of defence, Jarlath Bard, was absolutely amazing. Like, he was coming up our wing in the first half under. And some excellent play for a man, as you say, is near the 40 years of age. If he's not 40, you know, he's been playing this 22, 23 years for us, Trevor. Keelan Mooney in the middle of the field was excellent. But at the short whistle, it was 7-2. But I tell you what, Breda made a great fist of it in the second half. They got Trevor back to 9-8. And then they got I think there was 3 points in it when Joe Shields fisted the ball to the net. But the only way we thought Kieran disallowed the goal was that he was in the square before the ball came in. So you have to give Breda credit, but as I say, Sean Parr, the captain, what a captain, Jarlath. You've seen it yourself, covered every blade of grass in Park Esler. And as I say, Pete talked to Sean afterwards, and he probably was happy enough for the victory, but he probably thought they put themselves under a wee bit of pressure near the end with Trevor. But I tell you what, nobody will fancy them in the quarterfinals, Jarlath.
Well, Patsy,
No,
it's nice to hear that.
Patsy. They're not as right, Patsy. And like on my own view into that game, I've got to be brief. We'll try and get through this last round quicker tonight. But looking at the start of the first half, you'd have thought, and like we've talked about them in the show, and Jarlath being our Reserve man, we've touched on them rightly. And you'd have said these boys are going to win the championship. In the first half, they were lethal altogether. And like even you mentioned the disputed goal, Patsy. We watched it, I've done it many times. We've yet to figure out really why it was disallowed. But even disregarding that, Breda made a great fist of it the second half. They missed a lot of stuff. But Reserve still won by 4 points. At the end of it all, and they've been going well. And we discussed them, and they changed goalkeepers, they changed a few things. They've Mooney back. And as you say, Patsy, but nobody wanting them in the next round. That's other than that. When you get a town team. When you get a town team moving forward, they're hard to take the wind out of, Patsy.
I think we have to mention the goalkeeper again. He took off a great save from Donald Hughes midway through the second half, Jarlath. So for a man that has just come in to replace a great keeper and Jonathan Parr, fair play to young Clark, and you say again down Patrick, he was excellent, and he took off. I think it was 2 great saves the other night. So it was a good game to get the second round on their way, Jarlath. Reserve were well worth their win in the end.
Yeah, I had taken a wee note here just to mention Gareth Clark. He's grown in confidence game by game. I thought he had an exceptional game the other night. And you also touched there, Patsy, on Jarlath Farrell. A Rolls Royce of an engine, and what an example that man is to young footballers in our own club and to clubs throughout the county, that he's now taken to the field with men who were not born when Jarlath Farrell first pulled on a senior jersey. So, yes, be happy to hear, lads, we all tipped Reserve in that game. Now, the second senior championship game of the weekend, we all hit the skids, I'm afraid. It was Longstone 08, Ballyholland 210. That was a turn up for the books, Paul.
It was a turn up for the books, and Longstone were flying, and we've discussed it, Jarlath, on the show. Benny's at the helm there, but they were never in this game at all. They never got going. They never got, they never got their marquee men on the ball. Can't take it away from Ballyholland. A super win for them. And like I said it at the very first show we done, Jarlath, Ballyholland beat Mayo Bridge and Bourne. I think it was the quarter final last year, and got to semi final. And the village was, electric at the time. They disappointed badly, and I tell you what, them boys were wanting to put that sort of straighten that up this year, and maybe get to the semi-final and put on a bit of a show. And they're there on merit, and I tell you what, we all dismissed them last week because of Longstone's, good run of form. But they're a division above too at the same time, Jarlath, and it counted a lot. But Longstone were never in it really, and they'll have to come back to where they were if they're going to stay in this championship. As simple as that.
Jarlath,
it'll be tough for them, Jarlath, to stay on in here now, I'd say, after this.
I thought I tipped Ballyholland, Jarlath. I'm sure you got that down right.
No, Patsy.
Patsy wants 13 instead of 12, Jarlath.
If Ballyholland starts with an L, I'll give way, but there's a big L in front of me, and it's underneath your name. Here, listen. Go ahead.
Just to follow on from Paul there, we have to give Seamus Loughlin a mention. 9 points. We had them from place balls, and we go back again to this, how important it is to have an ace-free taker on your team. A lot of these teams now have ace-free takers, and Kieran Rush and Paddy McAteer found the net. And when you have players like John McGovern, Stephen Grant, Robbie White, Chris Brady, and Pierce Loughlin on your subs, that shows you Ballyholland their strength in numbers here. And as Paul has told you, Jarlath, we got a bit of a pacing last year in the semi-final against CPN, but that would have hurt them really big time. You have to remember, this Ballyholland team beat Bourne in the minor final 2 years ago in Newry, so a lot of them lads are making their way onto this side. And if not this year, Ballyholland won't be far away. They're looking for that elusive senior championship. What what a story that would be, Jarlath. A wee small club
Just to
outside
add to that, Patsy.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, Patsy. Sorry for cutting across you, but they've a good man at the helm there now too. Justin Lynch. He's been around the houses and he's been at a lot of clubs, and I'd say maybe it's his biggest venture so far. And Justin will be wanting to prove that he can stay up there with the big fellas and he can play in among them. You know what I mean? And it's a great chance for both club and management to go forward there. And we'll be watching them with a side eye, Patsy, as we say. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, Paul, thanks for that. Moving on, also then on Saturday evening, the three of us in our predictions got back on track as Loughnane took care of Darragh, Paul.
Yeah, expected that. You know what I mean? What was the final result of that, Jarlath? I just having it in front of me here.
Loughnane 10 points, Darragh 7.
Yeah, it's a low scoring affair, and like you'd be expecting Loughnane not to put up. And again, and I'm not slating in Darragh all the time, but Marcus Muscali probably scored 5 or 6 of them. They need an element to step up to the plate there in Darragh, and is that them out, Jarlath? I think that's maybe them out, is it? Yeah.
Well, they're into
they're into that playoff thing. Yeah, they're into that, but they're out of the championship as such, and they'll be disappointed over in Darragh. They had a run last year to the semi final. I think Patsy and me was at it in Newcastle, and they were expected to beat Shamrocks in that semi final last year, and they were expected to go and play in a final. Now this year they're out very early, Jarlath, and they'll be raised eyebrows down around Darragh, and hopefully they can straighten it out and get themselves back in the pod again, because they had a lot to offer last year, and some difference this year now, Jarlath, in the way they've gone,
Fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Was,
go ahead,
7 points each there, Jarlath, with 15 to go, and points from Ben O'Reilly, John McCarthy, and Eddie Nixon just sealed the victory. Ben O'Reilly was a great down minor under 21 player, and he's back playing with the club. So they played Breed in the next round. We're probably talking about that one later on in the show.
Okay, fair enough, Patsy. And lads, it was remiss of me not to mention at the start the 2 unplayed games, of course, from the weekend. Was a big Mourne derby, Ballymartin versus Call, which I believe is underway.
It's on at the minute. And the latest score. Score from it, Jarlath, if you want it, I can give it to you now.
Yeah,
the second water break. The second water break is tight. Ballymartin's leading 11 points to 9. And that's from about 6 or 7 minutes ago, Jarlath. So there'd be about, I'd say, 8 or 9 minutes to go, and it's just tight. And as we said, it would be tight. And we're not going to go into who tipped who yet, but we'll figure that out at the end.
And of course, there's another big Mourne derby awaiting the winner on that one in the form of Enrique, but we'll come on to that later on in the show. The second game then was meant to be played or refixed for tonight, was RGU and Carryduff. I seen on the official website earlier, it has been postponed yet again, Paul. Not sure of the circumstances.
No, I've seen it was postponed by the CCC, and they're meeting tonight to reschedule it. And I don't understand. I don't know, Jarlath, why it's postponed or what happened there. To be honest, we have no windows. But CCC's meeting tonight to refix it.
Longstone were awaiting the winner of that, so that'll probably affect the staging of that game as well. Patsy,
and there's somebody else waiting on the loser as well, Jarlath.
Yes, we'll move on into the Sunday, and it's probably fair to say that this was the first game, Patsy, that threw up a surprise. Clonduff 17 points, Bryansford 2-15, and the three of us, Patsy, tipped Clonduff.
Yeah, we did. This was an amazing match. This is what championship football is all about, Jarlath. You have to remember here, Bryansford didn't actually register a flag until the 25th minute of that game. And as I say, at half time, Clonduff were 8-2 up. So you go on into the second half then, and I think it was 10, 12 minutes in, Clonduff were leading 14-5. So if you had went to a bookmaker probably at that time, he would give you probably odds at 33 or 50 to 1 Bryansford winning that game. But once Bryansford start to play this expansive game, which Bryansford teams of old play, they just went with a bit of abandon. They just took the shackles off. And as I say, Danny Savage, impeccable again, unbelievable. Young Cathal Burns had a stormer. They took Timmy Hanna off the bench. And Timmy got the goal that actually tied it up 1-12-15. And then extra time was unbelievable. In the first period, Bryansford kicked 7 wides. And you just say to yourself, Clonduff's going to win this. They got in front then the early stages of extra time. But with about 2 minutes to go, another sub who had come onto the field to play, young Peter Bronigan, put the ball in the net, and then they secured the victory with a Patrick Sheridan point. So a 4-point win. Mark Hart will wonder how, in the name of God, his side didn't win that match, because Clondalk absolutely were brilliant in that opening 40 minutes. Ross Carr in the middle of the field, Paul Lively, Barry O'Hagan up front, and that they were causing umpteen problems for Brainsford. But we touched on it last week, and I said to you before, any team that Stephen Poacher is in charge of, you beware of them. They're sitting now, they're going to have a week off. They're going to be sitting waiting for this draw next week to see who they will play. And I tell you what, whoever they will play will certainly not be taking Brainsford for granted.
And you said, Patsy, they were sitting at 2 points in half time, so they bagged 213 in the second half, which is an exceptional return.
I was there myself, Jarlath. I'm not going to go into too much, and 3 nephews on the Dundalk side, but I don't know, and I know Stephen Poacher's a great manager and a great man, but you see, if he planned that out, what happened in Park Esther last weekend, he's more than a great manager, he's a genius. Because I think it got to the stage, my take on it, Jarlath, is maybe slightly different to Patsy's. I think it got to the stage where they only had a shot in the first, I think that it's the first shot in 26 minutes. They had to change their tactics because they were going to run out completely destroyed. So they had to do something from the bench. And they moved them up a bit. And Clonduff didn't really deal with that for a long time until Brainsford had they got the momentum then. They got Donny Savage never kicked the ball. And I'm not slating Donny. I love Donny as a player. He never kicked the ball to 40 minutes in that game. And when he did kick it, he kicked 4 in the trap. Like Hilltown, instead of having, during that period, if I would have Mark Hart or whatever you call him, I know I'm not a manager, but I would have thought I would have loaded a couple of more men into the middle of the field or something to see could they break the Brainsford momentum. Like the first half, the Hilltown keeper was getting the ball kicked out very, very easy, at no pressure. The second half, there was all sorts of pressure on him. We didn't know, it nobody to kick it to. Brainsford moved up them, but Jarlath, take nothing away from Clonduff. They had to move up and they had to do something to stop the flow of what was happening. And like they were 11 points down. Credit's due. They nearly kicked themselves out of it in the extra time, but they turned it round. Timmy Hanna was a great substitution. They always loved Timmy as a player. I think he gave everything he can. And the young Bronigan fella made a boo-boo just before he scored the goal. Like, it was a game full of everything. And I tipped last week in the show that we were going to see a penalty shootout this week. We were 1 minute from it, Jarlath. 1 minute we were from it in that game. So I was close, you know what I mean? But I don't know what way Hilltown's going to regroup from this. I'm sure they'll come out firing for the next round. And we all know where they're going there. And we're looking forward to a juicy encounter.
Of course, that's the thing that they are still in it. One team that's gone by this stage is Castlewellan. Patsy, they come up short against Bourne, not 8 to 14 points.
Yeah, this wasn't one of the best games probably ever seen in Down Championship football. Jarlath, Castlewellan got off to a good start. I think they were 4-1 up after about 10 minutes. But there was a few black cards issued at this stage of the game. And then, as I say, with Donal O'Hare as a free taker, I think he got 6 points in total. Bourne ran out 14 points to 8, but Paddy O'Rourke will be looking for a vast more improvement. Castlewellan are going through a bit of a rut at the minute, and sort of feel for them because Castlewellan, all teams go through these phases, Jarlath, and you just have to take the rough with the smooth. And as I say, we'll talk about it later, obviously, Bourne again, Kilcoo, a mouth-watering clash, but it's not the same Bourne team from last year. Their confidence wouldn't be at the highest at the moment. Maybe Paddy O'Rourke can instill that bit of belief into them that they need, to face the Magpies. So we'll talk about that later. But as I say, a 6-point victory for Bourne.
Fair enough, Paul. Anything to add on that one?
Just a wee bit on it. Bourne, it was sort of games played under the radar. There was bigger stuff going on elsewhere, Jarlath, as you know, and Bourne would be glad of that. Bourne would be glad to get a nice wee run away out of the limelight, to get themselves steadied back up again. And let me tell you, there's a mouth-watering clash coming up, and like that will steady Bourne back up from the 1 point game. You know what I mean? And they needed that. It was way off the spotlight. There was no real It was it was played at the same time as one of the bigger games, and it was out of the Park Esther, and suit born well to get that victory under their belt. 6-point win. Castlewell, and I don't know what's going on there. I know Frank is doing his best, but there just seemed something missing at the minute, Jarlath.
Okay, fair enough. And of course, time will tell whether Bourne can keep up momentum going into the next game against the mighty Magpies. Now, they took on CPM Warrenpoint last Sunday night. Patsy, let's talk about the game first. The point came out on top, 10 points to 9. Was it a game of attrition? Why was it so low scoring? And then we'll just move on to talk about the incidents of controversy at the end of the game, Patsy. So the football ended first.
It was a great game of football. It was everything Championship football is about. Intense, great defensive play, great breaking, great skills by certain players. Patrick Murdoch, he was my man of the match, come up from the full back berth to kick 2 points. They were level on 7 occasions in that game. Conor Diggin was on with me, and it was a nail biter right to the very end. It could have went either way. It was a repeat of last year's final. The public just were, delighted to see this game live on Park TV. And, most of the time it was a good advert. Kilcoo lost 2 players at 2 different intervals to black cards, which didn't help their case. Young Jerry McMahon took a double save off from Keelan Doherty, about 5 minutes before the short whistle at half time. There was anything, and if you had took your eyes off it, you could have missed quite a bit. But Kilcoo will lick their wounds, that they're down at this moment in time. But, a wounded Kilcoo team is a very, very dangerous team to face, Jarlath, to be fair about it, As I say, Conor Diggin was on with me, and we couldn't believe the intensity of the game, and it was a slippy night, Jarlath. There was a shower of rain come on, and somebody was telling me they were sitting down along the line and their fingers were actually numb. So they had the slippery ball to contend with too. Jerome Johnson, normally a ball came into him and skidded off him. It looked as if he was going to plant it in the net, midway through the second half. But slippery night, underfoot conditions, it was a real classic, it was like last year's final,
I tell you, Patsy, that's a very good summary. And Paul, before you come in there, Patsy, you've actually reminded me of something there. I was always engaged on Sunday night, and I didn't get to see the game, nor was I at it. And I was talking to a guy on Monday morning, and he says to me, "Beware the wounded tiger." He says, "I'm telling you, Kilcoo will be relishing getting an on crack."
Well, I think, Jarlath, I think if you look at your predictor page there, I told you Warrenpoint would win the game, but I still said Kilcoo would win the championship, and nothing's going to change my mind on that. Warrenpoint, that beat Bourne and they beat Kilcoo. But as Conor said that night, and we both agreed, there's no medals handed out at this stage of the competition. And, Kilcoo, somebody said, because there's been no Ulster this year, but they take down serious by God, they are taking it serious. There's no doubt.
All right, fair enough. Listen, you did, of course, predict Warrenpoint, as did Paul and I. Paul, listen, we're not going to sugarcoat it. A controversial conclusion to the match. So talk about whatever you want to say on the back of Patsy about the game itself.
Well, on the back of Patsy, the game,
situation with the timing.
The game itself, Jarlath, I'm telling you now, it was absolutely brilliant. It was on the Goldmouth camera, right? So one of the lowest scoring games of the weekend. It wasn't a high scoring affair. The first half flew and the second half flew. And see, whenever I'm at a game, Jarlath, and that's the type of feeling I get, see the last 10 minutes, I think there's 1 point scored, but you couldn't have took your eye off it for a second. It was a war of attrition. The whole place was shaking. I was getting drowned under an umbrella, and I didn't even feel the rain, Patsy. But that's the type of match it was, and we protected that on the show here. It was brilliant. And like, if the committee had got together and decided how we're going to revive or give this championship a bit of a spark, you couldn't have planned it any better, Jarlath. It was brilliant. But on the football side of it, I actually thought, now, not many people say, I actually thought Kilcoo played better football. And I think they'll be seriously wondering how or what happened to them. You know what I mean? But On the other token of it, there's a bit of controversy with referees and all that. I thought the referee was brilliant. That it maybe like in all sports, Jarlath, we have to look at one thing, and we'll discuss it here now, maybe for a couple of minutes. But when you go onto a pitch in any type of sport, any type of game, there's variables. There is variables. There's like what dressing room are they going to put us into? Who's the linesman? Who's the referee? What's the weather? What way we're playing with the wind? Them's all variables. And the team, once you sit down with your manager in the dressing room and you say, right, you're marking number 3, Johnny, whatever he is, right? It's your job there, right? To mark him, right? Forget about the variables. Forget about all that there. Your job's to mark him. But you see then after 15 or 20 minutes when that man is running into the referee's face and screaming about such and one done this, such and one done that. Well, the other man is winning the battle at that point. You've lost 10% or 20% of your game. Your thought on the man marking job that you had is gone. You're making mistakes that you wouldn't normally make because you get preoccupied with it. The siege mentality of it all, and we're all guilty of it, Jarlath. We're all guilty of it on certain occasions. And I think, and I said it here last week in the show, and I'll say it again, if Kilcoo would come out and open up, they've young Doherty, they've Ryan, they've Jerome, they have Dara, they have Ryan McAvoy, we can list the string of names they have. And I think if they didn't play that tip-top back-forward football, and like if you look at Kilcoo, most of the results is a point or two, and like you're always playing on the edge, you know what I mean? And like just on the talking point, on that last, maybe the referee did, I'm not sure if he blew it up early or what, but there was plenty of time played like for any team to win any match, Jarlath. But whenever the referee blew that whistle, Kilcoo were on the ascendancy, and I was in that goal mouth, right? Now, Warren Point had turned over the ball. Warren Point were now moving up towards the Kilcoo nets when Paul Falloon blew the whistle. Now, let's say Warren Point went up on that attack and scored a goal, Jarlath. Would we be hearing nothing about time and schedules or whistles or controversy? I think Kilcoo will be a wounded wolf. They'll take themselves, I know them well, I've been photographing them and videoing them this 6 or 7 years. They'll take themselves back to base camp. They'll look at it. They'll have to look at their own individual performance and see, was there anything that I could have done better on the day that maybe we didn't get into this knuckle duster, this live where they love them type of situations. This time it didn't work out for them. The next time it might, but they would want to start trying to keep away from that type of situation. They run into that situation in games all the time, and I think my opinion is they're better than that. They could have been further ahead of the point. If you look at the game as a football spectacle, right, they could and should have been further ahead at that time. You know what I mean? But again, everybody's saying about referees and refereeing. I thought Paul Falloon's a brilliant referee. He's fair. He lets the game flow. Maybe he made a human error, mistake. Who knows? But Warren Point were on the attack whenever that whistle was blown. They had broken down the Kilcoo attack and they were going up the field. So, if we want to, as I said, forget about the variables. I'm bringing the variables into it. But if you can leave out the variables, Jarlath, in any game, the rest of the result will work itself out. And I think Kilcoo's going to have to forget about all that. Like, I'm not saying run them down around, but a few times in that match, the referee was surrounded from all angles by men. And when them men's doing that, Jarlath, that small percentage of their game when they left the dugout is gone. And maybe that's what happened to them. We don't know. We know they're going to come back fighting. We know we're in for a electric atmosphere the weekend in Ura. And pity the COVID situation wasn't there because you could fill the house for that one. And Bourne coming under the radar, it's a lot to look forward to.
Well, Paul, I think that 2 or 3 minute summary there was an excellent overview of what has happened. You've painted the picture there, particularly for people like me that didn't get to see or listen to the game. You've come down there in support of Paul Falloon. And Patsy, I'm going to go over to you because you had mentioned earlier before we came in there, you talked about the human element and things like that.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna be blunt, Patsy. Were Kilcoo robbed?
That's a good question. As I say,
That's a heavy one.
Paul touched it on there about human error. Referees go out to do their best, and they're only human. Now let's look at it from another angle here, Jarlath. We have few new rules in the game. First of all, if a kick out's taken and the defender catches, you can't pass it back to his keeper. We had the mark in this last couple of years, that's the kick out mark. Now we have the advance mark. And to add to that, what have we? These water breaks. Now, we're going to touch briefly why water breaks happen. They usually happen around the end of the first quarter, fair enough. And in normal times, you would have water carriers running onto the pitch, so there wouldn't be any call for these water breaks. And at that time, Jarlath, I'm sure when you played yourself, maybe 4 or 5 players drinking out of a bottle. That doesn't allow that now. So whenever these water breaks take place, the timing of them, I don't know, is there an official time for a water break? That's the question we're asking here tonight. And I would love somebody to come onto the show and tell us that. Or is it the discretion of the referee? Is that something else the referee has to worry about? How long is the water break? You've heard the expression, the half-time break came too soon. Maybe sometimes for teams, the water break came too soon. Some players like this water break. I've been talking to a few players who absolutely hate it. It breaks up the momentum, and referees have that pressure too. They're all human. Me and Conor Deacon were talking during comedy during the match, where we're saying we're not mentioning the referee, and when you're not mentioning the referee, it's a good game. Some people say, was it blew up a minute too soon? I didn't hear the PA telling us how many minutes of added time we have. Kilcoo probably feel aggrieved, and maybe they're justified in feeling aggrieved, Jarlath. We have to be fair about the thing, But as I say, we're all human, we all make errors. I was reading about Conleth Gilligan there in the week. He says it's done and dusted. We're going to get on with it, and that's what Kilcoo will do. Paul Falloon, one of the best referees in the county, he's very passionate about the game. Let's be honest about it. He referees university games, school games. You know what I mean? He puts a lot of effort in, as do all referees. And you have to remember here, Jarlath, another thing. This COVID-19. This is a serious virus we have here. A referee's been out among 30, 35 men. And he's braving close to them and all. He can say to hell, I'm not going to bother this. Players too make the sacrifice. We're not getting away from that. They make the sacrifice to play the game. As we touched on earlier, it was an excellent game. This furore at the end happened. These things do happen in games. But as I say, anybody that didn't see that game, I'm not advertising our TV here by no means, but they should pay the £2.50 and go back and look at the whole game. Look at the clock. Count the water time and the water breaks. We could go through a whole list of things. But at the end of the day, the game is over. Wearing point won't be a point. Kilcoo will feel hard done by. They'll come back. They'll be looking forward to next Sunday evening. And I tell you what a mouthwater and tie, Jarlath. As I say, a close game like that, it was close as last year's final. 2 great teams, it has to be said. The 2 best teams in the county by a country mile at the minute. You've our teams there. We were talking about your outsiders last week from Duff, and we've seen what Brownsford can do. So, as I say, Warren Point, Kilcoo, one of them's going to win this championship. I still think it will be Kilcoo, because as Paul touched on there earlier, the amount of talent that club has is unbelievable. We talked last week. I was up a week before the Ireland final. We had a bit of a coffee morning. We're interviewing certain people. At 45 players, Jordan, 45 players on that panel. And all them lads got their run out in Dublin, day to Dublin. So you have to take your hat off them. Fair enough. A few of the scenes at the end, they didn't look, if you were watching on TV, didn't look that pretty. These things happen in games, as we touched on earlier. But we're all human at the end of the day. Some people said Paul Falloon isn't going to give up refereeing. He's too good of a referee, and we need referees in this county. At the end of the day, no referees, but no games. That's the bottom line.
Well, do you know what? I'm glad to hear you saying that at the end, because I can tell you it would be a much poorer county without Paul Falloon, who is, of course, on the list of national referees and is an inter-county referee. Patsy, everything you said there, Paul described it as variables, and everything you have just said there on the back of what Paul said comes under that umbrella term. Paul, we're going to move
quickly
on.
Before we move on from that, Jarlath, the bigger media outlets in and around the province touched on that match, heavily, because they thrive in controversy, Jarlath. But they didn't touch like us on all the rest of the games that we touch on, right? You left the big media paper on Monday, right? Back page headlines was maybe a load of boys around the ref. I don't know what was in the papers. I don't get them anymore. But the big media outlets thrive off this, Jarlath. We cover everything here in this show, and like the big media outlets, like you have your Irish News and stuff, push that issue to the limit. You know what I mean? That's their job. You know what I'm saying? We on this show here, we try to cover every wee angle of it, Jarlath, and we're trying to give our 2p as well as worth on it. And as far as I'm concerned, Kilcoo will not want all that there hullabaloo and the run up to the big game of Friday night. And as I say, we cover all the stuff, Jarlath. We just don't cover the bigger stuff. We'll cover the lower stuff as well.
Lads, I tell you what, we're going to give the last word on this particular game to the victors. Warrenpoint have now disposed of both Bourne and Kilcoo in the same championship year. And boy, they're going to think it'll be an absolute travesty if they cannot close the thing out in this year. Listen, we're going to move on. So the last senior game in on Monday night, and just before we come to that, the result is in from that intermediate game. Ballymartin have prevailed against Call, got it at the death, 12 points to 11, and now go forward for another Mourne derby where they play Anraict in the next round. So moving on then to the last senior game on Monday night was Mayo Bridge got over the line, Patsy, by 2 points against Glen, 113 to 111.
Yeah, this probably would have been out of the 4 games that was played, Jarlath, or 4 games that was seen on TV. This probably, it was probably the poorest. That's no disrespect to the Bridge or Glen. As I say, you would fancy the Bridge to win that game, and they were winning comfortably. Glen came back with Gareth Clark goal near the end, and they weren't that far away, Glen. And Glen have to hold their heads up high. They run Brentford pretty close. They won Mayo Bridge, whose championship tradition, we know all about it. At the start of the noughties, 99 right through, they won 8 championships. So Bridge are a good side. They're a good young side. But I have to mention one player in particular, and young Charlie Smith. What a game. Up and down the field, I've never seen in many minutes. It's a long time since I've seen a player that can hit a dead ball as well. And when I mean a dead ball, 50 yards out here. I'm not talking on the 13-metre line. I got Paul. 50 yards out, an excellent game. That Conleth the hair on and Kevin O'Rourke, they put a wee bit more experienced players on, probably resting a few players. But I tell you what, Glen near caught them on the hop there. 2 points at the end. Kieran McKeever, he's probably happy with the win, but he's not happy with the performance. By no means will Kieran be happy with that performance. And he'll have them boys, back in the training ground. You know what I mean? As I say, it's and then of course we'll talk about it later. The local derby against Clonduff, Bridge and Clonduff. How could we get any closer? So the Bridge won it, Jarlath, but it was a close call.
Fair enough. And of course, there's no let up. We're straight in it next weekend. Paul, you want to mention that briefly before we jump to the intermediate?
Just briefly, we'll mention that. And I was on duty again, Jarlath, on that one. And I'm not taking anything away from Glen or slating the Glen or anything, but the Bridge were coasting rightly for 40, 50 minutes in that game. And the start of the second half, you'd have thought there was going to be a complete overhaul. It was just a battering match for the first 15 minutes. But few handy frees. Matty Bagnall got himself on the score sheet. I think he got 9 or 10, maybe 11 altogether in the match. 4 or 5 frees, Jarlath, 4 or 5 pints in the shot, as in any game. It'll put doubts in your head. I think the Bridge run out a wee bit of steam. I think young Kieran McKeever will be looking at that, but an awful mistake. And I'm not afraid to say it. I'm a Bridge man myself, and an awful childish mistake for the goal to put. Well, the goal was the last actual play of the game, but to put Glen within 2 points of the Bridge, it was stuff that, you know what I mean, that nearly could have saved myself from some goals. And I'm not slating the lads around that, and they know what I mean by that, but it was an awful bad mistake for that goal. And that was the goal that probably took the gloss off the victory. It would have been a 5-point victory, Jarlath, without that goal. And, people wouldn't have been saying that it was run close and all. if you've been honest and truthful about it, it wasn't that close until the final hours of the game when Glen were on a. Once they got their tails up, they were going well. Molly Bagnall, excellent footballer, high on. Like, as I say it again, and I say it a few boys over the weekend, you see some brilliant footballers, and I'm not leaving without mentioning young Smith. I seen an interview with him yesterday, and he said he get sort of lost in work, in that COVID-19 thing.
Yeah.
And he was down in the Bridge football field every day at Jarlath, practicing them frees. And the result of that is what we witnessed at the weekend. He's 100%. When he puts the ball down, sometimes you look at him on, he puts the ball down, you wonder what's going to happen. I've only watched him a few games now, and to see when he puts the ball down, Jarlath,
Yeah.
nearly certain she's over the bar. You know what I mean? So Clonduff will be wanting to watch, given Handy frees away against Mayo Bridge. It's all tactical stuff. It's all managers will be thinking of this. And I have the feeling Mayo Bridge, I don't know, they'll need to take the pace up a bit on the Clonduff game, but we'll discuss that later, Jarlath.
Well, of course, they're still there, Paul, and you both mentioned young Smith there. It's wonderful to hear that there still is dead ball specialists coming through from the younger members of the panel, because I tell you this here, you could go through clubs throughout the country and go to a lot of underage games. And that's a dying skill, and you don't see many young lads practicing it. So it's lovely to hear that. And Patsy was saying there, like, the danger zone is nearly anything within 55 meters, never mind 45.
Exactly.
Anyway, listen, we'll push on. Oh, and just on that game, the three of us called Mayo Bridge on that one, in case anybody's keeping note. Now, we're heading back then to Leitrim and Shamrocks. Paul, I'm going to go with yourself on this one. And just let me get it in right away. Yourself and Patsy called that game for Shamrocks, but I knew a wee bit more. I went for Leitrim. 116 to 114.
We'll give you a rundown on it. And before I go into it, it'd be amiss not to mention a young fella, young O'Higgins, got a broken bone in his face, an accidental, nothing bad at all in it, but we want to wish him the best of luck from the show here. And I think I heard today that he's on the mend, and it was held up a long time, that game. But football wise, Jarlath, probably one of the best games of the weekend. Open football. I said it on the show last week. The two teams, at least, for sure, they'll go and play football. They did go and play football. The Leitrim goalkeeper took off miraculous save at the death for to keep them in the victory. It was tit for tat the whole way, and I'm delighted, because the reason for that is let them know that they can go on through this championship, and they'll have a rest now, and they'll have a rest up in the week, but they'll be looking over their shoulders, and they'll be saying, them boys there are not so soft. We'll need to keep our squad in order. And it's good for the championship, Jarlath, that Shamrocks were able, and it's good for the Shamrocks club that they're able to go to Leitrim and put it up to them. And by all accounts, it was kicking the ball in it. It was anybody's game. And even talk to the Leitrim men. I have a couple of great friends in Leitrim, so I have. And talking to the Leitrim men themselves, they'll tell you the exact same thing as I'm telling you, Jarlath. It was as good a game of football as the witness in the wild, and it was anybody's at the end of it all.
Okay, it's good to hear that.
Just to follow on a bit from Paul there, I have to mention a couple of scoring feats in this game. Shane Hanna, young man for Shamrock, scored 11 points, Jarlath, and I think 8 of them. Just
before, I'm sorry to cut in on you again, Patsy, but Shane Hanna has been out for 2 years. He's just back, and it's great to hear that from you.
Yeah, and as I say, on the Leitrim side, these McCrickard lads, top class, Rory, Pierce Ogan, Conor McCrickard, they scored 110 of Leitrim's 116. As I said, we'll talk Shamrocks up to win this, but we had Leitrim in there as well, along with an A team, which we'll talk about shortly.
Well, that other team, Patsy, who you're talking about, of course, were Saville. They get back on track against Taconic. 2-14 they put past them to Taconic's 1-4. That's the way we expected it to go, because the three of us called it. Do you want to mention that game briefly, Patsy?
Yeah, well, as I say, Saville absolutely the too strong for Taconic, Jarlath. There's no way they were going to lose that game. No disrespect to Taconic, as we talked about last week. Saville's back in there, and they'll be saying to themselves, a lot of these pundits and tipsters and all are writing us off. We might just have a wee shock or two up our sleeves for the rest of this championship. So Shamrocks is coming up now against Savile, as far as I'm aware, and both teams
Right.
in the green, so somebody's going to have to change jerseys there, but that will be another humdingers. Paul, I'm sure would agree with me.
Yep.
Very good. Yeah, that's mouthwater and trash coming up. We'll move on then, Paul. Saul 4-7, St John's 1-10. Saul, a team that are bubbling along nicely this year.
Yeah, I think I called that one, Jarlath. Maybe that may have been one of mine, but I say it about Saul. Saul are one of the clubs in Down that's coming forward, Jarlath, and I love to see clubs coming forward. I cover them in much programs, and I love to see them in finals. And this last 3 to 4 years, let me tell you, Saul are on a gentle slide of progress, and that there is no surprise to me. I'm a bit surprised where St John's have lost their way a bit this year from what they were, but I'm not really surprised with that one. And Saul is coming, and Saul keeps coming at the rate they're coming. They'll be putting it up to senior championship teams hopefully soon, Jarlath.
Very good, very good. Okay, listen, we'll push on, lads. Dromara versus Bright. Dromara 2-12, Bright 0-9. Patsy, you called it right. Myself and Paul, I don't know what we were thinking in that instance, but you knew a lot more about Dromara than we did.
Well, as I say, I was only going on the performance the previous week, Jarlath, against St John's. St John's tomorrow local derby, and I tell you what, St John's had to work very hard to get that result. So whenever I've seen Bright, up against them, you had a fancy this Tomorrow team, the star performers and Paul Flynn, Connor Burns, Luke Savage, they accounted 2-6 up to 2-12. Some great young players. We talked about Brent McKay last week. These are lads you're going to hear. Young Luke Savage, he might be small in stature, but I tell you what, he knows where the post is. So Dromara, they're a dangerous team. You just wouldn't fancy meeting them. Let's say that, John.
Fair enough, Patsy. Paul, we'll keep going if you don't mind. That refixed game tonight, Ballymartin versus Ollie Cole. We don't have the details of it, but what I can tell you is that you, Paul, punted for Ollie Cole in that game. Myself and Patsy called it right. Ballymartin have pulled it out of the fire there, 12 points to 11.
Fair play to them.
Yep. Right, we'll move on then. Next game, Clondabana 1-10, Bosco 0-5. Now, again, we hadn't got consensus. Patsy went for Bosco, Paul went for Bosco, and young Tinley went for Clondabana.
And so Clondabana won it easy, Jarlath. I was talking to a couple of Clondabana boys at the match the other night, and it was an easy enough victory for them. I don't know what we were on about Bosco in the very first night, Jarlath, and they were running late them to the wire, and ever since that, Damien Brady will be cursing us, because he said we've put the scud on them. They haven't done a thing since, and we're very sorry, Damien, from the show here, that if that's but we all know that they'll be back, and they'll be just very disappointed, and they've been going to Clondabana with a bit of hope, but Clondabana must have something down there, and the Clondabana boys in particular were saying to me, Rooney, you haven't a clue about tipping, So that's where that was coming from, Jarlath. But it'll be interesting to see what way they progress as they go to the next round.
And in that next round, of course, they've a big derby coming up against Tullalish. Now, we'll touch on that briefly in a few minutes. Patsy, you want to come in on that one, or will we move on?
Yeah, as I say, Bosco, we talked before the championship commenced that, there's some great players, but I'll tell you what, they have a great youth structure. There's some great underage teams, and one of our colleagues, Gara, has a couple of young men playing for them. So they might have to wait a wee while. Sometime, I have to remember this Bosco team, they've won intermediate championships in the past, and also won a minor title. Maybe it's way back in 2001 when they beat Longstone by a point that day. But, it's good to see teams around Newry, making an effort. And you have to give the three Shamrocks, the Mitchells and the Bosco, a bit of credit. They're all jockeying there to get players and stuff, and it's not easy. Newry might be a big city and what have you, but there's a lot of sports take place in Newry City, and you have to give the Newry teams, a wee bit of credit. So you do, John.
That goes without saying, Patsy. Listen, Paul Rooney definitely made the prediction of the weekend on this next game, where Drumgath put 4-8 on the board against the Kingdom 2-12. Paul, you called it right because myself and Patsy went with the Kingdom, so I'm going to let you.
I did on the Kingdom were flying, Charles. We knew they were coming off a good run of victories, but I've watched them gas this couple of years, and I tell you what, them 4 goals. A young man called Oisin Turner come on as a sub when he got 2 goals for them. It was a game of 2 halves, Charles, and Rake were winning 7-2 at half time with a big wind factor, but the second half just turned into pure electric. They opened up, the young fellas in Drumgath, and I said it and I'll say it again. If you get a bunch of young fellas coming at you and they get their tails up, you're in trouble. Oisin Toner come on as a sub, he scored 2. Young Ryan Hill, and young man for them, scored a penalty for them. And the old timer himself, we talked about him coming back to Drumgath. Peggy Downey chipped in with a 4th goal. And Rake scored 2 goals later on to take the gloss off it. But by all accounts, on the second half performance, and I don't think any in Rake man would be against me saying this, Drumgath deserved every bit of it. On first half now, you couldn't give them much, but on their second half performance, Jarlath, the tails up and the wind in their sails, they played a great open brand of football. They scored flat out, and the most important thing about that was, as we said, and we said before, the goals win the games, Jarlath, and the racked in goals. And the young fellas do that when they get their tails up. And I tell you what, nobody will want them the next round. And I keep saying it, and I'll keep talking about them. Nobody will want to go near them next round.
Right?
Yeah, just to follow on quickly, Jarlath, Paul's right there. The Kingdom were actually 9-2 up 5 minutes before the short whistle, so to speak.
Yeah.
And as Paul touched on there, Ryan Hill converted a penalty. So that left only 4 in it at the short whistle. So that gives them confidence. And as you say, you score goals, you win games, especially if you score 4 of them. And that's what Drumgath did. But we talked earlier, that they've won 2 intermediate championships in the not too distant past. I remember the late Patsy and Paul, God be good to him. I remember him the first time they won it, he says, I'll die happy now. And then they won it again. And he said the same thing to them, God be good, and he's gone now. But Patsy McPhone was a great, as Paul tell you, a great Drumgath Gale. And as you say, they're a small club too. And, Kingdom have great youth. I seen them against Connacht, as we talked about last week. And we'll not just write them off yet, that Kingdom.
And Jarlath, just before you go off that, Jarlath, whenever that factory come into the general sort of public domain, my phone was red hot for at least a half an hour.
Okay. People collecting bets, was it?
Yes, all the bets was collected.
Lads, listen, closing out the intermediate on Monday night, of course, was Annaclone 1-7 against Tullalish 0-7. Now, the 3 of us called Annaclone, Paul, in that game, but is that a lot tighter than we expected? I thought there would have been a more daylight between them, to be honest with you.
A lot tighter, yeah. And Annaclone actually going back a wee bit, from their last season, they seem to be. They're just not as effective as they were. I don't know what. Is there something different or something about their new management trend? I don't know what's going on, but they didn't win it by much, as you said, Jarlath. And they'd be wanting to up it a wee bit for going on to the next round if they're going to go anywhere in this championship.
Okay, listen, Patsy, we're going to jump straight to junior because the producer's putting pressure on me here for time. Right, yeah. So we'll run through the junior results. No disrespect to the junior clubs, but we'll maybe just take this game about. The 3 of us called the right result again in Killeaf, 1-14 against East Belfast. Probably Patsy, as form suggested, that's the way that was going to go.
Yeah, well, we have to give East Belfast a bit of credit here. The public and the viewers might know that at half time. And it was played in Drummond. Killeaf were only 1 point ahead of East Belfast. Killeaf are a very well established team in this county. East Belfast, we all know, new kids in the block. So that would instill a bit of confidence into me as regarding East Belfast, Jarlath. And let's hope that sometime in the future, hopefully when they do get their first victory at men's senior level, that maybe a camera is there to capture the event. So credit to them. But as you say, Killeaf, just that wee bit too strong.
That's well put, Patsy. Moving on then until Sunday, Junior Championship. the McCoy family will be happy because Mitchell's got over the line against St Michael's. Paul,
yes,
the three of us called it. The three of us called it for Mitchell's.
I
Not
didn't
15
think.
to 2-8.
I thought I was the only one maybe called it in that one, but anyhow, I let you off this time. But again, on that match there, the Mitchells fought hard. They fought hard, and against all the elements again. You know what I mean? And a man I mentioned on this show that I was down around the Mitchells for a while, you know, and a young fella that with great promise and a finisher of quality, Jarlath. Young Owen Flynn. I'll mention him again. He got the 2 points to win it for them at the death. There was nobody else in the field going to do it. He's a great talent, and he's in round about the 20 years of age mark. And I tell you what, the lad keeps playing football. He's a bright future, Jarlath. And roll on the Mitchells. They've done drum in the next round. Tough one for them, but we'll see how they get on. I was very pleased to be the win.
I think, Jarlath, we can't leave this one without mentioning a young man that plays for the Mitchells in half-back line, young Donny Talbot. He'd be a nephew of our producer, Cahill's. Now, Donny played in that game, wet day on a Sunday, and then come to Park Esther to be one of our cameramen Sunday night. So that's dedication.
But he was in good form, Patsy. He was in good form, you see. He was in great form, you know what I mean?
Fair play. Well done to Donny. And then closing out, lads, Junior Championship on Monday night. Patsy, you called it right. Ardglass got over the line again. Nahaderg 1-8 to 0-10. Myself and Paul came up short on that one as well. So, Patsy, touch on that briefly.
Yeah, well, Ardglass, you know, we talked about it before. You know, they're not a bad side. You know, they can be hot and cold, but I just fancied them. And as you say, there's only a kick of the ball between them. I was actually surprised at that. So credit to Achaderg for pushing Ardglass so close. 1 point in it, you know.
All right, lads, listen, we're going to move straight into what's happening this weekend. Now, the weekend after this, or the first weekend in September, we're into this situation where there's senior championship and intermediate championship relegation playoffs. We're not going to go through it this evening. We'll touch on it next week because there's none of the games happening until next weekend. Fair enough. So we'll just go with what is happening this weekend. First up, Paul, this weekend is Breda versus Loughlin Island. How do you see that one going?
I don't know. It's a tricky one. And Breda will be hurt after the. I know there was a game like they were in at Jarlath, and as you know yourself, you were there. They'll be hurt after that. They couldn't score effectively, really. They missed an awful ball of stuff in the second half. They'll be wanting to put that to sleep. But on the other token, it's a local derby. Loughlin Island, I don't know. I don't even know who'd be favourites in it. I would say Loughlin Island would be slight favourites in that one. You know what I mean, Jarlath? But I don't know if I think it's coming to tipping time now, isn't it, for us? And if I'm going to be tipping that one, I think I'd have to lean towards Loughlin Island. You know that, Jarlath, because they've experience on their previous runs in senior championship. Breda won the intermediate there a few times as well, Patsy, his last few years, and they're breaking into the senior ranks now. They're breaking in well, but I think they're a wee bit just behind yet before they can really be, you know. And I'm going to tip Loughlin Island in that one, Jonathan.
Right. Well, I'm going to join you in that tip, Paul, but I'll leave the last word in that game to you, Patsy.
Well, this game is a little bit of added spice, just in case you didn't know, Jarlath, because Brenton Mason, the former great Loughlin Island player and a good friend of my own, is now managing Breda. Yeah. He left Loughlin Island to go to Breda, and the Breda manager, Cody Thornley, the former Tyrone great, he's moved to Loughlin Island now. So there's going to be an added bit of space. As Paul said, it's a hard one to call, but I didn't see Loughlin Island against Dara. It just got over the line there last 5 or 6 minutes. Breda put up a good fist against Trevor. So as I say, I couldn't very well not tip Loughlin Island. Jarlath was involved with the club for many years, so I think it's a clean sweep for Loughlin Island and the tipsters there.
Fair enough, Patsy. Right, now, lads, we have a Super Sunday coming up. There's no doubt about it. Patsy, I'm going to let you start with Clonduff versus Mayo Bridge, and you're going to have to excuse me for 30 seconds because my dog's looking out.
You're okay. Right, me and Paul talk away. Well, it's a real mouth-watering tide, Paul, Clonduff and the Bridge. You know, what is there? 4 miles, is it 4 miles at the most between them? there were Jarlath tips at the start of the year. I tipped the Bridges, my outside tip, apart from Kilcoo. But this game, it's going to have everything in it. But I was very impressed with Clonduff, especially for 40 minutes, and I'm sure you were too, against Brentford. They really did play Brentford off the field in that opening 40 minutes. And, the form of your nephew, Ross Carr, in the middle of the field, has been excellent this last while. And I would say Paddy Talley will be taking a look at young Ross. And Tom Close, his midfield partner, had an excellent game. And then, you've that young lad, Paddy Clancy, up front. And we can't forget Barry Hagan and Stephen McCombie. What an excellent player Stephen is, Paul. He's very accurate from frees. And then, of course, they introduced Arthur last Sunday. So maybe Arthur will be pushing for a starting place. So I'm going to have to go again here, Paul. The Bridge supporters not like me for this, but I'm going to have to go with Clonduff on this occasion. What's your own views on it, Paul?
Oh, my own views on it, Patsy. When it comes to this match here, our house becomes a different sort of a house. Do you know what I mean? Like our Teresa, my sister, is steeped in Hilltown. She's just completely turned into a Hilltown woman altogether. There's no Bridge blood left in her at all. Yeah. And fair play to her. She's 3 great sons there playing great football for Clonduff at the minute. And like our house is sort of it's a weird house for the week now. You know what I mean, Patsy?
Yeah.
Until this match is over, and always when this match is on, especially at championship time, it's a weird sort of a feeling. And hopefully I don't run into R3 or anything, on the way down to it or anything like that. You wouldn't want that happening, Yeah. You don't mind running into her when it's over and it's all over and done with. And I've 3 nephews playing there, and I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to have to call it as I say it. You know what I mean? And I'm going to have to say that Mayo Bridge on last week's performance will not beat Hilltown. If they can play the way they played the first 40 for the whole game, I think they have the talent within them to get the result. But I think they're going to need to be a bit more effective on the scoring stats, Patsy. You know what I mean? If they're going to beat Hilltown, I tell you what, Hilltown, I shouldn't even be saying Hilltown. It's Clonduff, as we all know, and I'll be warned on that as well. But Jarlath's going to make me call this, aren't you, Jarlath? Like the mother of family ties. I know you are. Yeah, I'm going to have to. Well, I'm going to call it. I'm going to lean towards Mayo Bridge in this one. If they can play the way they played against Glen, that 40-minute production against Glen, they need to do that for the full hour. And hopefully they run out victors in this one. And that's no offence to Teresa or Aidan or Ross or any of them. That's the way I see it.
Well, Paul, there's offence taken or not, it's too late now. You've it out there now. But here, Clonduff were my dark horse tip, and I'm going to stick with that. But
I went for them too there, Jarlath, and you were putting that dog out, so.
I'm sure, Patsy, I was laughing when I was coming back to my seat. You wouldn't get dogs barking on Sky Sports, and that's the beauty of this show.
Well, that's it. You heard my clock last week. I'm actually moved to the kitchen this week, so you'll not hear the clock tonight doing that.
Right, here, Paul. I'm going for the next game. I'm going to you, and I can't get the music out of my head. That Monday Night Football or Super Sunday, whatever it is. Two tribes go to war. So this is the one. This is the one. This really is the one.
And everybody be listening. Everybody be listening out for what we have to say on this one, Jarlath. And I tell you what, I'd have plenty to say on it, and I'll say him a bit. You know what I mean? But Bourne, I'm saying a bit Bourne. Bourne come out of that CPN a wounded animal, you know what I mean? And they were well and truly beaten that night. And fair play to them, there was no hard feeling or no messing after or no old carry on out, and they took their defeat, shook hands with the opposition and away they went. You know what I mean? Fair play to them, Jarlath. They slipped away to Castlewell or away to Mayo Bridge last week. Dealt with a team, not an unformed team, Castlewell, and they've got their ship back, on the oars again. And Kilcoo coming out of Park Esther last Sunday night if they ever needed a bit between their teeth, Jarlath, that's it. They've got it. They've got the bit between the teeth. As far as they're concerned, the world and everybody's against them at this particular time. You get that feeling inside camp sometimes, whenever things don't go your way. But I say it again, and I'll keep saying it, and I don't know if the Kilcoo managers listen to this here, but I think, and my advice to them men would be to let them lads go and play a bit of football. Take your chances. It's not all about, like Jarlath. I'll say this too, and I'll say this here with a heart and a half. They were very, very honourable winners of all the times they won the championship. They were very, very honourable winners, and credit them with that. And they're gonna, if it goes against them, and it goes against them, they're gonna have to be honourable losers. You know what I mean? If you're an honourable winner, you have to become an honourable loser. I'm a Mayo Bridge man. Like my memory of underage, younger times was going to championships and you really knew you were going to win them. And that's not boasting or blowing Jarlath or anything. But that came to an end. You know what I mean? That came to an end in our club. I would hope they're building again towards that. Maybe never will I ever see that again in my lifetime. And Kilcoo, man, is going to be the same. I remember the night in Hilltown. Everybody remembered where the stewards were brushing the water knee deep out of the park. The first night Kilcoo beat that great Mayo Bridge team. Fair play to them. They've done it. A few mistakes made in the Breers panel, and they've went on from that to where they are today, Jarlath. I followed them at minor level, I followed them at all levels, and I think, and I still say it, and I know a lot of the boys well, I know them personally well, let them go and play a bit of football. Bourne will be there. They'll play a bit of football as well. Although Bourne retreated a wee bit in the point game as well. They'll have to stop that. Either team comes out with an attacking frame of mind, it could be a brilliant game. I'm looking forward to it.
Go ahead and call it, Paul.
I'm going to call Kilcoo. There you are.
Right.
I'm
Now,
going to call
Patsy,
Kilcoo.
before I let you in, Patsy, right? One team that's not playing this weekend is Branchford. We talked about what happened last weekend against Clonduff. And the man at the helm there is a man that's well known to us all, Stephen Purcher. And Stephen's joining us on the line. So, Stephen, you're very welcome. This is Jarlath here.
Thanks very much, Jarlath. Thank you, mate. Thanks very much.
Well done last weekend. Listen, we're joined by Paul and Patsy. Patsy, I'm going to let Patsy in here to engage you. I want you to talk about how you got over the line miraculously, some would say, last weekend, and then just give us your view on what's coming up for this weekend. So, over to you, Patsy.
Well, Stephen, first of all, congratulations on last week's victory. I said earlier in the programme, after 40 minutes when you were 14-5 down, bookmakers would have probably given odds of 50-1 on you winning that game. But I think, Stephen, you probably said to yourself and Kieran, right, boys, let's take the shackles off, let's go for it. And I tell you what, when that second half, as I say, that reminded me, Stephen, of Brainsford teams of old that play a brilliant round of football. You have some young lads there mixed in with a bit of experience, and credit to you for winning that game.
Yeah, listen, Patsy, thanks very much. First and foremost, thank you. Listen, we're only in a quarter final, but listen, I suppose the manner of the victory and the way we won the game, it probably sort of stood out for people. Believe it or not, the first 15 minutes was exactly the way we wanted it to pan out. We wanted the game to be very, very attritional. We had looked at Clonduff against Carrickduff and we thought, well, if we give them space and we open up early, the game could be over after 15 minutes because they're the one team in Down who have a forward line who can really hurt you and really rack up a big score against you. And I think against Carrickduff it was like 2-4 or 2-5 to not 1, and the game was more or less over. So we had put a big emphasis on starting the game really, really well, but probably a little bit cautiously. And after 16 minutes, we hadn't registered a score, but Clonduff had only registered 2 scores. So if we just had posed a bit more of a threat in the final third and a pass or two had gone the way we wanted it to go, I think the first 15 minutes just would have been perfect, exactly the way we wanted the game to pan out. We had an extremely strong bench on Sunday, Paddy. We obviously strategically had started a team who we felt that they weren't going to finish the game, and they knew that, and certain individuals had a role. And the beauty of it is, Patsy, at the minute, what we have is we have a group of lads here who are buying into what we're asking them to do. So anything they're asked to do, they're doing it, and they're doing it to the letter of the law. We had great preparation leading into the championship. We played Warm Point in Moygannon and we drew with them. And from a psychological perspective, that was a big, big result for a group of young lads who are only learning a new way of playing and a new system and a new management team. And then we played Kilcoo in our second competitive league game, and we lost to a late goal from Keelan Doherty. in a game that we probably should have edged. So that gave the lads great belief as well. That was a Bryansford team last year that lost to Kilcoo by 15 points in a league game and 11 in another league game, and there's a lot of psychological damage over the last few years from defeats like that, so you're just trying to install a bit of belief, Patsy, into the lads. You're trying to install a bit of character, a bit of spirit and a bit of heart. And I think that, for me, I said to my father actually on Sunday night, I says it wasn't the quality that we produced at times, it was more the spirit and the heart and the character that has probably been disassociated with Bryansford teams over the last few years. And there's character and spirit and heart and an abundance in these lads, and it's just a matter of trying to squeeze it out of them. And I think on Sunday, they've seen what they can do, they've seen the potential that they have, and now they're sitting in the quarter-final of a weekend off. We'll get 2 or 3 really good training sessions in next week, and fingers crossed, we get a bit of luck and we get a good draw and we give it a good go.
Well, Stephen, as I said, the boys here, always beware of a Stephen Poacher team. I remember when I had the honour of commentating on it when St Columban's won the All-Ireland under-16. You were dead and buried, you 8 or 9 points down, went to extra time, just won that game. So beware of a Stephen Poacher team. And with that, Stephen, I'm going to hand you over to my colleague here, Paul Rooney.
Stephen, how are you going? Paul here. We've been lucky enough to we've interviewed your management team a couple of times there. You've been live a couple of times on the stream, but I was seeing earlier on the show, if you don't know if you're watching or not, probably were, Stephen, and you're probably ready for me. But if you planned that out as it went, you must be one of the greatest managerial feats that I have ever witnessed in my time. And I tell you what, Stephen, I've been around a lot of football.
No, well, I suppose, Paul, we didn't plan it to go like that, but we did say to ourselves, look, the point that we made was very, very straightforward. The point that we made was that if we took them down the home stretch, that we felt that we had the bench to win the game. Now we didn't foresee ourselves being 8 points down at that stage, but we did see the game being tight, and if the game had been tight, we did feel we had the bench to win it. And I thought in extra time, we had the quality and we had the personnel that could really hurt Clonduff, and I felt at that stage, even the lads that came off the bench, for example, they're like in extra time we kicked 7 wides in the first half of extra time, and to be honest with you, if we'd have taken 3 or 4 of those, I think the game would have been over long before the end of the second period of extra time, so I thought we finished the game very strongly. But listen, it probably comes back, Paul, to the way we reintroduced the boys after lockdown. A lot of teams were running the life out of men behind closed doors, and there was talk of men in Kilbrony Park and talk of men in Jarlath and all sorts. But look, we took a very, very relaxed approach. We give the boys an awful lot of time to themselves. We give them a lot of individual responsibility to do their own little bit of work. But when we came back, Paul, from the moment we came back to training on the 30th of June or 1st of July, whenever it was, all we simply done was play football. We've just played football and training, and the boys have thoroughly enjoyed training. I think it's a year where you can just take the shackles off, forget about all this strength and conditioning and all these conditioning programs and boys and drink bans and stuff.
Exactly.
Let lads, after the year we've had, after the absolute madness of the last 6 months and in life in general, just let lads go out and enjoy their bloody football and give it a go. And I think that the lads have really embraced that attitude, and it's worked out well for us,
Great for you, Stephen. And Timmy Hanna was a great substitution as well. And just before I let you off now, on that point, we'll be hoping to see you and the lads out, letting the shackles off in the next round and let them at us, Stephen.
We will surely, Paul. We will surely.
All right.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Stephen, before you go, is Jarlath back here? Listen, just in 30 seconds, tell us who's going to come out of Clonduff versus Mayo Bridge and Kilcoo versus Bourne.
Well, look, Clonduff, Mayo Bridge, obviously, they're neighbours. They'll know each other very well, Jarlath, and I can see it being a very high-scoring game. 2 good teams, 2 good forward lines. I always find, Jarlath, that 1 week is very hard to recover from the defeat, and particularly the defeat that Clonduff have had. And, if it was a clean slate, I would maybe edge towards Clonduff, but I just think with Mayo Bridge getting the win and Clonduff having thrown away a lead again ourselves, I'd probably just fancy the Bridge to come in a bit more buoyant than Clonduff. Kilcoo and Bourne again is a very difficult game to call. 2 teams, there was a kick of the ball between both teams last year in 2 games, but listen, after the events of Monday night or Sunday night or whatever, Kilcoo have a wild habit of galvanising themselves and creating a siege mentality. Not that they need to create any more of a siege mentality out there, but they have a great habit of doing that, and I can see this being a real attritional tight affair, and maybe just Kilcoo just edging it,
All right, okay, Stephen. Listen, you didn't sit in the fence there, and well done for your season so far. And it's always good to hear from you. All right, all the best, Stephen.
Thanks, Jarlath. Thanks,
Stephen.
gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Patsy, listen, we're still at Kilcoo and Bourne, and we Paul has went for a Kilcoo there. How do you feel about this game on Sunday night?
Well, as we talked earlier there, Paddy O'Rourke and the Bourne team will be hurting. Will be hurting, first of all, weren't going to beat them, I think, first time in the championship in 40 years. And then they went to Castlewell, as Paul said, or the Newbridge to play the town. They won the 6 points. No miracles worked there or what have you. But I tell you what, as Stephen Poacher said there was two cracking games last year in the Morgan Fields quarter final. And especially in the replay, Bourne had to go away. They were 3 or 4 points up. But as we all know, you never write that Kilcoo team off, and they're a winded animal. We talked earlier in the show about that. We've discussed it plenty this evening. And bar a minor shock, well, put it like this: if Bourne beat Kilcoo, in my opinion, for what it's worth, it'll be a major shock. So I'm going to have to, I'm Bourne man, born bred, but I'm going to have to go with the Bourne team. Fair enough, they were beat narrowly by Puman Nifa. I'm going to have to go with Kilcoo in this occasion, Jarlath.
You're going with Kilcoo. Okay, well, I tell you what, just for a wee bit of interest, I'm going to go with Bourne, because I don't think that a super juggernaut of a club like that has suddenly become a bad team. So somebody is going to be on the receiving end of a hiding from Bourne some of these days. So it might as well be this weekend. Anyway, so I'm going for Bourne right now. The remaining senior game then on Monday night, Longstone, of course, are now in limbo because that carried up RGU game was put back again tonight. So we'll move on then till the intermediate. Patsy, I'm going to come back to you because the first up is Dromara versus St. John's, and Stephen touched on it there. A team coming off a win as opposed to a team that's coming off a defeat. What way do you see that going? Because that's exactly what's happening here. St. John's in the last round, and Dromara got over the line.
Well, it's a repeat of the first round game, Jarlath, and we all know we suspected that St. John's would have won that game comfortably, but they certainly didn't win it comfortably. I think young Andrew Gilmore had a starring game for them, but there's only 3 in it at the final whistle there, and they were level on a number of occasions. I think maybe Dromara led at one time. But as you say, Dromara, that win over Bright would boost their confidence, their young side. And, I'm going to give them the nod again, the Johnnies here. Fair enough, it might be a division lower than St. John's. But, it's a local derby. It's got the makings of a cracking game. And St. John's, I think, that defeat, against Saul will have hurt them badly. There's still have John Clark there, but I think that I think that Dromara will win on this occasion.
Okay, now Paul, I'm only bringing you in to tip it because
St. John's. I'm going to go with
St. John's. Right. Yes. Okay. Well, I am going to take Patsy's advice, I have to say, in this regard, Paul. Just there's a bit of interest. No, we talked about that is in a lot of respects a derby game. Another derby game on Saturday, Paul, is Clonabonna versus Tullalish. That has the makings of a good game. Yep.
The makings of a cracker of a game, and a couple of great Clonabonna men slagging me at the weekend about how wrong I was about Kevin McCartan in particular, saying I couldn't tip the back of a cow, you know what I mean? But I tell you what, it's a great game for the championship, and it's a great game for Down GAA, and it's a great game for the two clubs. And I mentioned it last week, and I'll say it again, all the manager has to do in them cases there is just put up the name of the odd team on the wall, who you're going out to play, and to see if the boys is not able to play. They shouldn't be there in the first place, Jarlath. If the opposite team on the sheet is not able to motivate them Clonabonna men or them Tullalish men, they shouldn't be there. And like we mentioned earlier on, Seamus Ryan and the Ryans and all, Clonabonna and Kevin McCartan, and a good old relationship with Clonabonna, and it wouldn't be against them in any way, in their tipping ways. And this week now, I'm going to tip Clonabonna, Jarlath. There you are, in that one.
Right, Patsy, call it.
Well, just in a few words, I'm going to go again, Paul. I'm going to go with Tullalish. They were nearly beat that night, so not a bad side, Tullish. They won this title 10 years ago in 2010. So I'm going to give the vote to Tullish.
Okay, well, based purely on last weekend's results, the winner as opposed to the loser, I'm going with Clonabana for that game. Now, moving on then into the Sunday, big one, Paul, Saville versus Shamrocks. It would be,
Yes,
it would make a great final, but unfortunately not.
no, it would make a great final, and it would make a great game to probably to televise too. You know, like I think, in my opinion too, in this television games, I think maybe you should cover an odd one of them intermediate games. Like we missed a cracker of a game the other night, and it'll be a ding dong game. Sal will come into Shamrocks in the league and to ship the heavy defeat. And let me tell you, they're not becoming in no championship form, and they'll be shipping no heavy defeat. I'll tell you that. But again, the Shamrocks, if the Shamrocks had got a devastating defeat last week in Leitrim, it maybe could have swayed me against them. But I'm still going to stay with them, and we're going to tip Shamrocks to win this one here and move on in this championship. And I don't know if Saville have enough to come back from what they were. You know, they were well beat in the league in Shamrocks. I know league doesn't count as championship, and they'll be wanting to avenge that there. But the Shamrocks keep their heads, keep their players on the field, keep playing football. I think they'll win this one, Jarlath. I'm going to tip Shamrocks.
Okay, Paul, I know you touched on it there. The Saville would feel that the old Shamrocks won from
Yes.
the league result early in the year, but purely on the basis of the score they run up again to Connacht, I'm going to side with Saville on this one. How do you see it, Patsy?
Well, I said at the start, I fancied Shamrocks to win it. Fair enough, the Fontenoys pipped them at the post there last time out. But as Paul spoke about earlier there, you know, Shamrocks had a good win over Saville in the league. You say league form doesn't count when it comes to the championship, but Shamrocks will be hoarding from the good young side. Saville, they're going through a wee bit of transition period at the moment. You know, they were a great side. You have to remember 8 or 9 years ago, they were in the semi-final of the championship against Rio Bridge, and they ran the Bridge very close in the first half that time. So you don't become a bad side overnight, but a slight vote in favour of the Shamrocks. I hope my good friend Brian Green and Ed Saville there, he'll have to be happy in protecting that, but I have to protect it as I see it, Jarlath, and we're going to go with the Shamrocks.
Okay, Patsy, thanks for that. And listen, tonight, Paul, then we know Ballymartin got over the line against Call. Next up for them is another massive Mourne derby on Monday night versus the Kingdom.
Yeah, massive derby for them, and it may come too quick for them, Jarlath, God bless them. You know, they only got over the line by a point tonight, and it may come too quick for them. And Rake will be wanting to straighten up that Drumgarth affair for their own sanity and their own fan sanity. They'll be wanting to straighten that up, and I have a funny feeling that Rake could walk away with that one, Jarlath. You know what I mean? Ballymartin, yes, it's a local derby, and when they see the Rake crest or the jersey, it'll be an extra 10-15% per player. But I think in Rake maybe have too much in the bottle. And there's a man down there in Rake that I remember. You'll remember these. The twos remember this years ago. Who used to do a player of the championship. What was it called, Patsy? They give out jerseys and all. It was something to do with Powerade or something. Remember it was Powerade?
Yeah.
The Powerade was sponsoring it. Well, there was a man won a couple of them jerseys. A man from Unrake, Declan Doyle, they call him. And would you believe it? And believe me now, that might have been way in early 2000s. That man's still playing and still playing well for Enrique. And that's a credit to that man in particular. Like, he won the Powerade position for I think he was a cornerback or something. Declan Doyle, they call him. And how long is that man playing, Patsy? He's still playing. But I'm tipping Enrique Danahy, and I want a special mention to young Doyle there.
Okay. Take it away, Patsy. Last word.
Yeah, well, as I say, I see if that game, if there was none of this COVID, that Mourne Derby packs whatever ground that game's going to be at. But unfortunately, nobody will be able to see it. A Mourne Derby, you know, I seen Enrique earlier on the championship, and the guy that Paul's talking about there, he's actually not as old as you think he is, Paul.
He's playing a long time.
No, he's not that old now, believe it or not. You know, I'm going to go with the Kingdom here, Jarlath. The Kingdom, they have a very young side. Bernie Rowan, who used to manage Warren Point, is at the helm there, and I tell you what, their fitness levels is phenomenal. You know, so I'm going to give the vote to Enrique.
Okay, and I will I will concur with the both of you on that one, lads. That's the last game for this weekend. I think we are going to be back on next Wednesday night, but I really enjoyed tonight there. That was.
And just a wee thing, Jarlath, I enjoyed it myself. But
Paul, you want to mention the book?
A wee thing, I want to mention the book. A good friend of mine, Tony Bagnet. It's a book that all Down men would be interested in, Jarlath. Not only me, not only Patsy, not only yourself, but it's a book that every man in Down GAA and the circle of Down would be interested in. It's the Paddy Doherty story, and it's written in coordination with Paddy, and you have Tom O'Hare and. You have Laurie Powell, Kevin O'Neill, Colin McIllarney, Peter Rooney, Val Kane, Mickey Cole, all giving their wee bit into it. And it tells the story of Down's first ever victories in the 1960 all. And a great part in it, and like a man that never really gets much of a mention. And, when you mention the teams of the past, it's the great Sean O'Neill. But one of the most interesting things about the book was what Kevin O'Neill had to say. From my point of view, Kevin O'Neill said that all the Ulster teams didn't know much about how to win in Croke Park until they landed a man called Peter McDermott into the 1960 training camp. And he was a former referee, Jarlath, had refereed all Ireland finals and knew the tricks and the ins and outs of what went on around the field and where to do and how to howl him on and where to push him on and how the referee wouldn't see it. Very, very interesting stuff from Kevin on the way Peter McDermott coached him in a proper way and not an illegal or, an underhanded manner. And Kevin O'Neill mentioned things in the book that, like, he actually hadn't heard of. Now, this man has an All-Ireland medal, a winner's medal, right? And before this man McDermott arrived into the camp, the carry on he was on about, they hadn't really heard of it. They hadn't considered it, like. But just for the sake, if anybody wants to read about the whole story, and I mentioned there are a load of men that's in the book and I've taken part in it, but real famous Down men. And like, I don't know if everybody in the county would know about this book. It's a book entitled The Making of Paddy Moe, and it's written by Tony Bagnan in conjunction with Paddy, and he spent weeks and weeks and weeks with Paddy in Castlewell doing this book, and it's a sort of a must-read for any man, and and I want to point it out, it's out there and it's available, and if any of us wants it, go and get it. It'll be very interesting, and yourself, Jarlath and Patsy, would love it as well.
I hope it is a big success for both Tony and Paddy. I did see the extracts from the book were featured in the Irish News a number of weeks ago, and I really, really enjoyed the story about, Patsy and a potential soccer career.
Yeah, that's right.
Go ahead, Patsy. Yeah.
No, just absolutely, Paddy. I've been on a few chat shows hosting Paddy, and just to listen to some of the stories from days gone by, absolutely amazing. But last week, I think we mentioned on the programme about our good friend Emmett Hockey and Longstone celebrating 75 years. And there's another anniversary, Jarlath, and you would probably know this. It has to be worth mentioning. The old school, St Mark's High School in Warrenpoint, 50 years old this year. It opened in 1970. I went to the second year in 71. I was just happened to be talking to my good friend Dave Barney McAleen, and Barney taught me PE and taught me a bit of geometry as well. But Barney actually told me, you wouldn't believe this, between Down Championships, Ulster Championships, and All-Ireland medals, all the teams in St Mark's over the years, there's been 140 cups that have come to St Mark's. 140, that's hard to believe, George. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Patsy, that has to be up there on a par with any school on the island for
some great players played in 91 and 94 for the great Mickey Linton, Paddy O'Rourke. That's just to name a few. Jarlath,
Benny Coulter,
Benny as well, John Shorty Trainer. Some great players from that.
Yes.
Oh, it was a real nursery, and I often thought, do you remember a few years ago there, in Marty Clark's time, the St. Louis were able to step up there and play at McCrory. I'm not sure if that option was open to St. Mark's in previous years, and I often wondered because they had some exceptional players went through them gates. If they had been allowed to mix it, Patsy, they would have held their own again any college team.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we have to also say that in the first couple of years, Colin McIllarney, the great Arkle, was a PE teacher there too. So there's been some great footballers come out of St. Mark's, some great coaches. Liam Austin, of course, teacher also in St. Mark's, PE man, so credit St. Mark's, 50 years old, and as I say, only for this COVID, I'm sure there would have been umpteen celebrations. 50 years, it's a long time. St. Mark's, a very talented school indeed, and I'm proud to say I went to St. Mark's, Jarlath.
And it continues to be so, and I know from an academic perspective, Patsy, their results have been incredible over the past few years. So, and the school, incredibly, is now seems to be oversubscribed on an annual basis. So there's no greater barometer of success than that. I know there's people, unfortunately, that don't make it because of the numbers. Probably would not agree with what I've just said there, but it's a mark of the success and the status of the school, and I wish them well for another 50 years. Paul, listen.
I'm just going to wind up, Jarlath.
Carl's telling us to wind up here. I know he is going to
wind up. I'm going to wind up myself.
For the book up.
Just before you leave that subject, on a wee personal note, I see before every point match, that man is just after mentioned there, Barney McGilleen, and just before throwing, he'll make his way to the lane and he'll have a wee words with Niall in his ear every time before a point match. So watch out for that now from now on. But I'm looking forward to the magic weekend, Jarlath. I'm looking forward to Staunton Park Esler on Sunday evening, and the hair standing on the back of my neck, and Kilcoo and Bourne going heavy tilt at all sorts of tactics and all sorts of football to get themselves into the next round of the championship. Can't wait for it to come. And as I say, I'll be there and I'll be watching with all eyes that I can. As I said to you last week, it was a war of attrition and it was excellent and I loved it. And hopefully I get the same feeling this weekend.
Absolutely. Tell me, Patsy, is there any confirmation yet about what's been televised at the weekend?
No, well, I think we're going with definitely Loughnane and Breda on Friday night, Jarlath. Sunday afternoon is, I think it's Clondalkin Bridge, and then the big one, Kilcoo and Bourne. We haven't got our roadie yet, the commentary team, so sure we'll be told tonight or tomorrow. But
I've been the goal with Jarlath.
It's a bumper weekend, but sure.
Yes,
why would anybody need Sky Sports when you
don't need it? You don't need it
when you're down senior football championship.
The beauty of it, Jarlath, is if you don't see the game, you can get the deferred coverage on Park TV for £2.50. It's £4 to watch the game normally, but if you miss it, say on the Friday night or what, you can watch it on Saturday. So as Paul says, it's going to be an exciting weekend. Three great games coming up, and then as I say, we're not quite sure when Longstone against Kerry Duck or RGE will take place, but another good game there to look forward to as well. So thank you, Jarlath, and thanks, Paul.
Listen, we leave it at that. Yeah, Paul, thanks very much.
No problem. I enjoyed it, Jarlath.
Enjoyed tonight's show. Yeah.
As I say, it's the most relaxing hour I have all week, and I enjoy every minute of it.
Okay. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thanks, boys.
Damien, you are a legend, and I want you to keep up the great work that you're doing at the moment for Destination Newry. And this destination is beautiful, and everybody should come to Newry because I love this place. See you soon.
Yeah.